I promise this is as weird for you as it is for me. About 6 months ago, I made a video listing ways I thought that Valhalla was going to feel like the older Assassin's Creed games. At the time, I was replaying every single game leading up to Valhalla's release. But this was still before launch, before we didn't exactly know how the game was going to play out and feel, and before I even got to play the game in previews. So I thought it'd be fun to look back now that the game's been out for a couple months now. I've got like over 120 hours played, look back and see exactly how close or how far off I was with those predictions. Recruiting Jomsvikings will be a core part of the gameplay loop. We'll go on adventures, encounter new people, and recruit them to our cause. But we will know their names, we'll see their faces, and we'll interact with them throughout the story. They won't just disappear after we see them once. Now that I've played it, looking back, I wouldn't say that recruiting Jomsvikings is a core part of the gameplay loop by any means. It's not really a thing that you seek out, which is not a negative. It's not a knock by any means. I think it feels more natural to sort of come across these characters as you're playing through Valhalla's narrative arcs. There's a list, I think it's about 6 different characters that you can recruit at certain points in the story. Some of them you can completely miss, and I happen to miss, I think, 2 of them. I've got at least 4 on my roster. When you do recruit these characters, you get to know them pretty well during their character arcs, like they are essential to the story. And then there's a moment at the very end like, yes, I would like to recruit you. I want you to continue with me on my journey. And it's pretty cool because you get to assign these characters to the Drakkar and you see them on your boat. But these characters don't really play a huge factor in the story like I thought they might have. Now, there are plenty of characters that do fulfill that role in meaningful ways that you see like leading up to the final battle and right before the closing moments in the narrative, which is awesome. They're just not the Jomsvikings. So in that way, I would say those characters kind of fade in the background more than I thought they would have. This isn't like a BioWare game where you've got, your crew, you've got Garrus, you've got Liara, whoever you like to put in your squad, and you constantly have them by your side and they're commenting on the narrative and what you're doing in the world. Valhalla is a completely different game. So in that video 6 months ago, I looked back at all of the AC games and compared, like, did they have recruitment systems or did they not? And of course, we know throughout the Ezio trilogy, we were recruiting assassins, and that kind of continued in some form or fashion, changed a little bit there, upgraded a little bit there. I think it's fair to say that I had pretty high expectations for this looking back at the previous games. And I'm not sure that they necessarily were met, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like Jomsvikings were underdeveloped compared to my expectations. Now, there are some ways that I think it could be better, and I think we will see some improvement pretty soon. Like, river raids are supposed to add some kind of experience leveling sort of RPG system to our Jomsvikings, where right now it's just kind of you randomize them and customize how they look, and that's about it. I'm looking forward to getting that sort of Ezio trilogy vibe from my Jomsvikings. In Valhalla, if I had to guess, we're probably not going to be renovating. We may use old Britannic ruins and structures that are there from hundreds of years ago, but from what I've seen, I believe we'll be creating new buildings. And each of them has a purpose in gameplay. We'll visit the blacksmith to craft and buy new weapons, the tattoo parlor to get some ink, and the barracks to consult our war chief and Viking warriors. Looking back at the older games, I think I was looking for that rooted narrative connection, especially Assassin's Creed 3 with that homestead system and recruiting these skilled craftsmen to come and give actual tangible, benefits to the settlement. I expected buildings to have, specific gameplay purposes, maybe even more so than the homestead did, and also to feel like, in Ubisoft's own words, more like a Skyhold from Inquisition or the Normandy from Mass Effect. And I think they really pulled it off. The settlement is core to the experience. I mean, we are going back to this location after every single narrative arc, and then to upgrade our weapons, our armor. There's a bunch of settlement quests specific to characters that teach us more about who they are as people, rather as just being like a gameplay function, just to use and then leave. I will say though, after a certain point, I think the settlement feels a little bit lifeless. It's fun to build it up and it's fun to participate in those narrative beats and moments, and I enjoyed those, but there were points where I felt like nobody had anything to say, and it felt a little less full of life than I wanted it to be. So I think really my only criticism is I wish there was more conversation with those characters to be had in my settlement. You guys know the classic example with Hytham.
I have to go.
Then go in peace.
In Wrath of the Druids, which is actually not that far away, it's supposed to come early spring, we're supposed to get some kind of expanded trading system because Dublin, where the, DLC is going to take place, is going to take us to Ireland. It was a major trading hub at this time in history. So there's supposed to be some system that I hope is wrapped into the settlement and expands that even further. But overall, I think, my expectations were met for the settlement. Eivor's strength is dictated by a combination of gear, abilities, and tools rather than levels. But we know that Eivor's power will be represented in some way. I'm guessing it could be like a gear score, ability rating, something like that. We've also been told that there's no more grinding, that Ubisoft is avoiding progression walls that would keep players from accessing different parts of the game. This one's good. What actually happened is, power is basically levels. It's the same thing. And strength is mostly dictated by whatever your power level is. And the most defined way that kind of proves that is that if you wanted to bump down your difficulty, I don't think this works post-patch, but if you wanted to bump down your difficulty, you would just uncheck certain nodes in the skill tree, and then that would bump your power down. That way you weren't feeling like overpowered in certain regions where you're way over-leveled for the suggested power. Valhalla does take that level before anything else approach when it comes to how powerful you feel. I mean, you can have stronger weapons, you can upgrade them to mythical or keep them at a lower tier, but that's not enough to overcome power differences. If you're 50 power below something that you're facing, you're gonna get wrecked. So definitely did not meet my expectations in that respect. However, I think it did in terms of grinding. I did not run into any situation where I felt I had to go do side stuff in order to progress the main story. Now that could be just the way that I play and naturally explore. I was just leveling left, right, and center. Constantly I was doing things that net experience. I think for me though, I also wanted the skill tree to feel like my choices mattered more. In the end, it was more of a linear progression where, it kind of mattered how you got there, but you could always reset your skills, so there wasn't that element of, wow, I made this choice and I'm gonna have to own it, or I'm giving up certain things for other things, when in the end, you're gonna get every single point in that massive skill graph. And then one final note on that, I did want tools in this game, and they function more like abilities, so not exactly the classic approach that I was looking for. In Valhalla, we do know that we can manually take our hood on and off to reduce detection, which is super awesome. We can also feign death to trick enemies, which has multiple applications. It's really funny looking back at what I said because we knew about the hood, manually taking it on and off to reduce detection. That was big, that was really important. And then the feign death ability. I spent so much time talking about that because it was in one interview. When you play the game, the feign death ability is just not even consequential. I think you get it too late in the game for it to really impact gameplay, but I maybe used that thing like once or twice. But from where I stand now, the hood mechanic is really fun, it's awesome. I'm with a lot of you though that I wish I could keep that hood on during combat. There's something about having that ability that would have been really nice. Social stealth overall, it feels like an attempt to me. It feels like Ubisoft Montreal really tried to take an old element of this series and make it work within the newer engine, within the new template. I'm talking about Origins and Odyssey. And as a fan of the older games, I really appreciate the attempt. Seriously, I do. But it's just so rare that social stealth actually plays a factor in Valhalla. I thought that we were going to be spending more time in cities, which we do spend a fair amount of time in cities, but I can't say that I spent time using monks to blend in, or using crowds, or using any of the benches that were placed in specific spots. It just doesn't really work in Valhalla. After a certain point, I just lost the patience to blend and to do these things that felt more passive than active like they did before. Distrust zones, I think, is an awesome idea in theory, but also the way that cities are laid out in Valhalla, they're just so big that, yeah, I can't justify like moving around really slowly with monks in order to pass through guards. I mean, it is fun actually to infiltrate the front gates of a city in Valhalla. You know, you get the drunk nearby, you lure him, and then you're in. That's a fun little interactive thing. But beyond that, I think I expected more from social stealth. And again, I think this is more a product of the time period and, you know, maybe some misguided expectations about how many people would be in cities at this time in history. They're pretty sparse in Valhalla. And so whether that's something where you look at the time period and wish it was just in another time and another area of the world where it was more populated, I don't know. My only hope is that this system can expand in the next game, whatever form that will take. We know that Valhalla will have the memory corridor, blank slate loading screens from the older games, but we don't know about assassination interrogation scenes yet. The fact that Ashraf is making Valhalla gives me hope because he did bring those concepts back for Origins when he could have easily abandoned them like Odyssey did. At this point, we knew that Valhalla would have the memory corridor loading screens that for some reason were not in Odyssey, they were in every other game before that. But we didn't know about confessions, and it was really awesome to see those return in a very unique way for Valhalla. But at this point, I had faith that they would because Ash was still at the head of this project, and yeah, every game that he was a part of, confessions were a really big deal. And I think that's also due in large part to Darby being in charge of the narrative. Looking back, I think it's fair to say that Valhalla pays just as much, if not more, attention to modern day than Origins, and certainly more so than Odyssey. Animus anomalies are the big way, right? Those occupy that in-between zone that Darby told us about in an interview, feels like forever ago. It was a way for them to bring the modern day into the simulation, into the Animus, and not break up that immersion of, constantly having to stop at a certain point in the narrative to leave the Animus and do something in the real world. That experience was a little jolting for people, and it was jolting for me. It's something I noticed when I was replaying those games. So I really do appreciate, what Animus anomalies do for that connection. I think where Valhalla fell a little bit short, though, is how often I would see these things. And I think that's more due to the fact that Valhalla is a massive game, but it's also a non-linear game. So you can go, dozens of hours with not seeing a single one of these anomalies or not having a moment where you jump out of the Animus. In fact, it's a little interesting. At the very beginning of the game, obviously we have the modern day intro, but then you hop into the Animus and we really don't even see or hear from Layla until the very end of the game. Again, that's what the anomalies are for, right? To bridge that gap. But yeah, it's funny how I felt that sort of disruption in experience, but playing Valhalla, I still wanted more of the modern day. And I realize I'm not everyone. Some people have wanted there to be no modern day in Assassin's Creed for, many entries now. And that's just simply not an option from my perspective. I think Assassin's Creed needs the Animus and it needs the modern day. These things work in tandem. At the end of the day, I think Valhalla did a great job connecting to modern day. I think the payoff for modern day for longtime fans was just mind-blowing. I made an entire video about how I felt about, the end of Valhalla. The revelations there are pretty amazing, and the thread that the narrative team was able to connect between the Layla saga back to Desmond. I mean, hearing his voice again just gave me shivers. If Valhalla is your first game, you were probably really confused by what happened, but it's such a long-standing series that it felt awesome to see AC lore really respected and kind of propped up in a big way, where in previous games, it just wasn't really central to the main plot. And just talking about this gets me fascinated about where is this going to go next? Are we going to see this storyline resolved in this DLC in Valhalla, or is this going to carry forward to the next game? I really can't tell at this point. My verdict 6 months ago was that I thought Valhalla will deliver something that will make older fans truly appreciate the experience and how it goes back to some of those more classic roots. And I truly do think it did. It pays a lot of homages to the classic games. Something I didn't even mention and we didn't know at the time was guaranteed one-hit assassinations. We didn't know that there was going to be a button that would just toggle those on, so that was really cool to see. The return of social stealth in some form or fashion, the emphasis on the modern day actually being central to the main plot. Being able to just have your hood on for most of the game, it really is important. But as a purist, as someone who started with something else completely different, I think it's hard not to look at Valhalla at the end of the day and want it to be a completely different game. I know that's probably insane to hear. I enjoy Valhalla for what it delivers and what it went for. At the same time, we can see a completely alternate direction it could have gone in. I share the sentiment that I, in the end, wanted Eivor to want to be an assassin, a hidden one. I wanted parkour to be the engaging traversal mechanic that it used to be, the decision-making, the way for me to actually express myself through movement, which was just so unique in video games. I still hold on to hope that that might become the case in the future. I am ever the optimist, so for me, I hope this stuff happens in the future. I don't see why Ubi would deviate from what they're doing here. Valhalla was a smash hit, a smash success in terms of sales. And critically, I mean, it's getting good scores, and I think it deserves a lot of the scores that it's getting. I actually did my Game of the Year list. I didn't make it into a video, maybe I will soon, but yeah, I put Valhalla in the number 4 slot for me. I tend to favor games that are more innovative, at least in my eyes, and Valhalla felt a little more derivative, but at the same time, a really good derivative game that I enjoyed well beyond its, just main runtime. All right, guys, this was a really different video. Let me know what you think about this. Definitely a looser format. I almost feel like I'm a weatherman here, giving you guys the forecast for the week. But yeah, I want to make some looser, more personality-filled videos, so let me know if this is something that you like. If you did, remember to hit that subscribe button. Also, turn on the bell to turn on live notifications so you don't miss my next video. Should be coming in the next week or so. Also, be sure to follow me on social media. I'm jayvee on Twitter. I'm at jayvee on YT. And then Instagram, I'm jayvee.yt. And if you want to chat more, have conversations just like we had on the video, but with this community, join our Discord server. We're discord.gg/jayvee on YT. Links for everything are in the description below. Big thanks to my YouTube members, my Ultra fans Dave, Grass, Deadwalker, Bill, Cam, Jacob, and Cullen. Super fans Kamal, Casey, Tipsy Sergey, Tarl K, Ryan, and Tia. Fans John, Matthew, Spyro, JVO, Level 42, Joe, Lil Man, and Bloodsky. And supporters Nos, Nightmare, Sung, Taryn, Adam, Blaze, Mr. Hollow, Quickness, Firkin, Abhishek, Shug, Rivi, John, and Jennifer for supporting the channel. If you want to support me further, click the join button below this video. It's probably on this side. In exchange for your support, you'll unlock things like custom badges, but also exclusive play sessions with me every single month. So if you'd like to learn more about this, click the link in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.